welcome back to episode 129 of Talkoffamepod podcast with our host, Kylie Montigney. I'm super excited to have on TEDx speaker, Memento Mori etologist and founder of 4,000 Mondays, Jodi Wellman. Thanks so much for joining, Jodi. I'm super happy to chat with you again. It's been so long.
Oh, it's so good to be chatting with you. Thank you for the opportunity to podcast away with our time.
Absolutely. So we as we kind of talked about like the last time we talked on my Instagram series, you have founded 4,000 Mondays in which you help your clients to stay motivated to work well and live a better life of focusing on keeping the big end in mind. Like how do you like motivate your your clients to kind of live a life with a big end?
Yes. Well, it's really counterintuitive. I'm going to be the first to admit that when I say that, I say like the secret to a well-lived life, it's actually contemplating the fact that we're totally going to die. And I know that is not what most people want to hear. And you might think that that's the opposite of motivation. That's like, let me go crawl into a hole and I don't know, drink or do something to ease the pain. But a cool thing is that research does show that when we are reminded in a really visceral way of our finitude, our mortality, it can be this awakening for us. And so I have this thing where I like us to count how many Mondays we have left, because we roughly get 4,000. That's why my company is called 4,000 Mondays. And so when we do that countdown, as much as I know it sounds morbid, it's more about let's sort of slap ourselves in the face and wake up and realize that if this time is diminishing, which it totally is, what do we want to do with those remaining years or weeks or months? Because that is more within our control than we think.
And like with counting how many Mondays you have left, like why is it kind of important to track how many Mondays you have left? Like people might probably think like, oh my God, like why should you calculate how many Mondays you have left? Like I don't want to stress out enough when I die, but like why is it like so important to calculate how many Mondays you have left?
Yeah, well, you're tapping into this research that's called temporal scarcity. And it's the notion that when we look at any kind of asset or any kind of commodity, anything in life, when we see it as having like a limited time only feel, when we see that it's rare, the perception of its value goes through the roof. And so it's not enough, to be super honest. And I've studied positive psychology. That's my background academically, and in working with people as a coach for many, many years. I wish it was just as easy for us to say, let's get inspired to live a life worth living. And many of us are, we're motivated to get involved in different kinds of self-help and improve our lives. And that's awesome. But in all honesty, and psychology shows us this, we need a little bit of a poke in the ribs. We need something to almost, I'll say scare, and I'm not trying to scare anyone, but we need that startled awakening to say, whoa, because let's say on average, so for us as females, we will roughly live on average till the age of 83. And we can do the math and say, oh, okay, I've got either more than half left, or in my case, I've got less than half of my life left. But, then we can we do our thing where we go along our merry little way and we don't want to think about it. And I say, hold up, let's make it granular. So this gets really back to the specific question I think you're asking is like, why count the Mondays? It's, if I know that I have 1,890 Mondays to go, it's such a ridiculous number that it's so specific, that it makes me go, whoa, like I need to make the most out of this week, because next week, as that number is going to be counting down. And obviously we know I may not even get that many Mondays. So it's more about this temporal scarcity idea and making it so granular that it does wake us up to the harsh but true reality that can hopefully motivate us.
And like with back what you said, like you said your research and stuff, like did you like study at the University of Pennsylvania, right?
That's right. Yeah, right near your hometown. And I am now an assistant instructor in the Masters of Applied Positive Psychology program. And I ate all of it up, this idea, this notion of the scientific study of what makes life worth living. And while I was there doing my thesis, I did it on this topic of Memento Mori, remembering that we're going to die. And I was fascinated, to be super honest, Kylie, because I didn't realize there was as much existing research out there on this as there was. And it gave me actually more of a feeling of confidence that like, oh, I can talk about this and not just be some sort of a whack job who's talking all about befriending the Grim Reaper. I can actually be like, no. Scientists have said, like, research studies are out there. It's, I think it's really, I mean, obviously I think it's cool. It's what I'm interested in, but there is a neat background to it academically too.
Like, did you like study 4 years at Penn, or you like kind of like switched and different things?
Yeah. So no, I did my Bachelor of Arts elsewhere, and then I did the master's program at Penn, which was the best year of my life. Yeah.
Like how I'm sure you're used to the PA weather for like the time you were there. Like especially with like we were talking earlier, like PA weather it's literally changing every single day, especially during the winter time. Like it's literally was 50 degrees sunny and now yesterday and now it's snowing. It changes every single days.
Absolutely. Well, that was definitely an experience in Philly, and certainly parts where I've grown up, but I can sort of take this concept of how these are like the draggy parts of life and acknowledge that, in a lot of the work I do, it's not just about reminding us incessantly that we are temporary, although that is absolutely what I love to do. But it's more about, well, how do you then flip that and design a life you love with however much remaining time you have? And when you use the example of weather, it kind of reminded me that we obviously know that we can't design perfect lives. We know that we have to sometimes roll with the punches, and so sometimes it does include having, here's like another crappy winter that I have to endure. Yeah, well, I would actually argue that technically we do have the right to move wherever we want. So we could go if we wanted, just to a warmer climate. But the point I was looking to make was that even in the midst of any kind of adversity, whether it's weather or a really crappy situation in our personal lives, or we get fired from a job, or, insert here, the list goes on and on. The good news is that a lot of those hardships contribute to more meaning in our lives anyways. And so it's kind of one way that we can, in many ways kind of put a positive spin on the fact that hardship does help us appreciate the good things that much more.
Exactly. And like I wanted to circle back a bit, like on calculating how many Mondays they have left. Like, why are kind of Mondays so important? Like why shouldn't you calculate like Tuesdays or Fridays? Like why is it specific to calculate Mondays specifically?
Yeah, totally. A lot of people have said to me, like, Fridays are the best day of the week. Why not 4,000 Fridays? And I'm like, I agree that Fridays are the best. However, that's too easy. Like, we all love Fridays, and there's not a lot of angst that goes on with it. Where I like to, again, provoke a little bit is that Mondays, we usually have a lot of feelings on a Monday, right? So we wake up on a Monday morning and we are either raring to go because we're interested in what we're up to, whether it's school or work or whatever you're up to, or it's a really cool highlight for us that, like if it's a total drag and you want to stab yourself in the eye and you just don't want to do the job anymore, or whatever it is you're up to, that's a really good indication that maybe something needs to change. And so I like to say, so for example, back to my case, if I have 1,890 Mondays left, I want to make sure that I'm liking what I'm doing on a Monday, which presumably means I'm also going to kind of be happy on a Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and so on. So I intentionally put Monday out to be a little bit of a litmus test of, are you set up to enjoy your remaining Mondays, or might you want to be making a change because you don't like your current Mondays?
And like with like 4,000 Mondays, it offers many programs and such as what is your leadership legacy? And leadership is a big part of today's society in our generation. Like how can like you find your desire to lead with greater attention, meeting and intention in meeting that you kind of offer in a workshop?
Yeah. I love that you're asking this because most people don't ask me about the leadership legacy stuff. And I just get so excited about it. Many of us, in our, we'll put it this way, in our discomfort, in our anxiety about not wanting to face the bitter truth, we do this thing where, in addition to kind of denying and not talking about the fact that we are unfortunately perishable, we embark on certain things that some researchers call like an immortality project. And sometimes it's just this pursuit of something, or it could, for many people, it's about having kids that we know will live on beyond us, or it's about maybe making enough dough so you can donate it to the library and have a name on a building that's your name that will live on beyond your death. In that same vein, creating a legacy is what we're talking about. It's like, how do you want to be remembered when you are gone, long gone? And I work with a lot of leaders in my day-to-day work. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for, and whether you're a leader or not, and it doesn't even need to be like a leader of a big team. It could be like, you can be a leader amongst your friend group, et cetera. Being mindful of saying, what kind of imprint am I making? Like when people, how will people describe me when I'm no longer here? It could be on the earth, or it could be maybe as a leader because you've moved on to another company. How do I want to be remembered? How do I want to set up whatever the situation is right now for success, even beyond me? Because that's a pretty remarkable trait, right? Like a lot of people will just want things to flow well while they're there. And then when they're gone, they're like, yeah, I don't care what the condition is I left it in. But what is the legacy? Like, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to, are you living a life that is in alignment with your values? Are you mindful of leaving something better for the future, for future generations? And there's this concept called generativity, which is about creating an environment that endures even better beyond you. And I think that that's a really cool way to get over sometimes the death anxiety, is the planning about, okay, I have this immortality project. I know I'm not immortal, but I've got a thing I'm doing. I'm mindful of my legacy. I'm building something important. I'm building a really cool business or a program, or I'm writing a book, or I'm doing something that is going to hopefully make a positive dent in the world, even after I am long gone.
Like, how can kind of people like make an impact? Like if people are like, oh my God, like how if I die sooner or later, like I want to make a positive impact, but how do I know if I want to make an impact, or like how do I know if I'm making an impact?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the first question about like, well, how do you know if you want to make an impact? So I work with individuals and teams, and some people will like get a spacey look in their eye when I'll talk about the legacy, because it actually doesn't resonate with them at all. And I'm like, that's fine. You don't need to worry about that. Like, in all honesty, I don't have a big desire to have something live on beyond me. Like, I'm pretty comfortable that the day I go, I'm gone. I hope a couple people care. And of course, I want them to say nice things about me when I'm gone, but I don't need to have a body of work that hopefully will live on 100 years beyond me. And so I'm an example of somebody that doesn't need to necessarily, like, you kind of have that knowledge inside of you when we talk about this. Some people, though, will right away feel that sort of like magnetic attraction to, yes, I know, I feel this need to build something that goes beyond me. It's, to be honest, I think it's an innate quality someone has, or in some cases, some people that maybe have had a near-death experience or some kind of traumatic event, they've kind of woken up to life in a new way, and they all of a sudden see it with a little bit more of a, wow, wait a minute, my mortality's been threatened. I really do want to leave something beyond me. Age can do it too. So for many people, as they, maybe retire or get up in the years, they sometimes see life because there's a different horizon length, right, of how much time is left. That can motivate some people to really be mindful of legacy. So timing, just natural innate inclination, as well as like life circumstances, can spur us to either give a care or not give a care about how and what we want to leave behind us. And so it can be, I guess I just, one thing I'm mindful of is it doesn't need to be something big. So I use the example of putting your name on a building. Well, like 99.999% of us ain't never going to have the money to donate like a wing to the hospital, right? So that's not going to happen for most of us. Most of us don't want to write a book. Most of us don't want to. But what about the way you made people feel? Wow, we overlook that one. What about thinking about the ripples? And there's research that is about when someone has died, if you kind of track back and say, maybe you mentored that person at the office and you had an impact on their life, and then that had an impact on their friends. Or maybe you were a really great boss and you helped inspire and motivate someone to achieve something bigger. Or maybe you were a great parent and you helped, like all the ripples that occur, or as a friend, maybe you had just such a positive energy and spirit that really infused into your friends. And even if you go, they're still talking and laughing and thinking about you, and that spirit kind of lives on in a way. And so it doesn't need to be that our legacy doesn't need to be cash based,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't need to be magnanimous. It can be about, again, considering the way that we have affected people, what experience we have provided for people while we interacted with them.
Mm-hmm. And like, as we kind of talk about research about life and death, like what do you talk about? Like, it's very important to make an impact on others, not as a mentor, boss, friend, etc. Like, what does like your research kind of show about life and death?
Around impact, or just in general
Oh,
about
in
our
general.
perceptions of life and death. Yeah.
Yeah, in general.
Well, it's fascinating, I think, because most of us would rather not talk about it at all. And so I just give you such credit right now, even like initiating our conversation, because you're willing to go there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a direct relationship between death anxiety and our perception that we have lived a life well lived. And what that really means is that they say that people who are either unwilling to address and talk about death with family and friends, maybe, they get to the end of their lives typically, and they will have more anxiety about the experience of dying. And yet, if they are able to, number one, embrace it, talk a little bit about it, create a living will, like get set up, do whatever the admin is, but like talk about it, acknowledge it. Acceptance is kind of what really they call it, especially in Buddhist faith. And live your life fully, so that when you do get near the end, there's way less anxiety if you have that feeling of like, you know what? I killed it. Like I left it all on the table. I traveled, I laughed, I loved, I baked, I did all the things, I had fun. Like I did things that had meaning. And it doesn't mean, again, it doesn't need to be a life that looks so good just for social media or to impress people. It's about what makes you feel like you led a full life. And I'm fascinated by research that shows that our anxiety about death tends to be higher if we have that niggling feeling like, ooh, I'm not really living my life fully. So let's live life fully. And the good news is that we get to have like a rip roaring fun life, and we get to eliminate some of that extra stress about the idea of mortality.
Mm-hmm. And like with living life and being scared of like being dying, like like I had experiences. I'm like, oh, I'm scared to die. Like I don't want it. Like I don't ever want to die. Like I have experienced that. Like this, to be honest with you, and like I'm sure dozens of people I faced it, but like why do kind of people fear about dying? Like with people,
Mm-hmm.
millions of people die each day. Like there's tons of
Yeah.
research about dying, and people are often like, oh my gosh, like this can't happen to me. I'm gonna live for a million years. So, like, why do people have like a kind of anxiety about dying?
Oh gosh, it's such an important question. It's a multi-pronged answer, and I'll just touch on some of them, right? So it depends on the society you live in. So Eastern societies are far more accepting of the cycle of life, and they meditate often. People in Bhutan and in various Eastern cultures meditate on death up to 5 times a day, and really just indoctrinating it into their life. And so it's more of a Western um, culture phenomenon of, oh, we don't want to talk about it, and it's become something that is easier to avoid. And so that's one big component to it. you know um Another component as to why we don't really want to go there is that we do have a will to live as a core characteristic of humanity. And it's this sort of desire and incessant need to endure that that's kind of just what keeps us plugging away, and we do our thing. And when we are all of a sudden faced with a moment like a diagnosis that is scary, or we are in a really close call, car accident, or any scenario that actually does remind us of the fact that we could have lost our life, that can highlight us to wake up. And admittedly, that's what I want to do with our work, is I don't want to have us go through a near-death experience in order to feel that feeling of this is precious. But we're wired to want to stay alive.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this psychological tension that occurs when we know that there's an inevitable ending that is not going to let us live forever. And so we go into kind of a cognitive dissonance. We intentionally avoid the topic. We're very masterful at it, except a lot of existential psychologists say that by doing that, we are creating more anxiety for ourselves. And most of our anxieties somehow deep down are born from this. And until we start really accepting the fact that, yeah, you know what, our time is going to come. Let's, so therefore live until we die. That the need to deny will unfortunately be our comfortable place, because we do have this deep desire to stay alive.
And like, I'm so glad you said that, because like with like we were talking about earlier before we started, like we were talking about COVID-19, like the lockdown, but like that reminds me, because like when COVID-19 kind of became a big thing and the whole world shut down, like it really kind of blew people off. Like it reminded people like, oh my gosh, like I should enjoy the life I have. Like I want to do more things. But due to COVID, it stopped everyone. You couldn't leave the house. But then like it is like it made a lot of people realize, including me, that like, oh my God, like I need to live life. Like I need to like I want to live life while I have it, because of course a lot of dozens of people are dying from this disease, and like it could possibly be me. Like if I test positive, I could possibly die from this disease. So I'd rather
Yes.
live life and not like even maybe taking a risk of getting the disease, but you shouldn't care if you get the disease, because if you're living life, like of course should be careful, but then you should live life at the same time.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. You're highlighting, I think, something where many of us have experienced, that the pandemic has done sometimes like two different things for us, and at the same time, even. Number one, it did, because we locked down and we had to live smaller, it created that clarifying of priorities of, man, when I get to live again, here's how I want it to be. Like I want to change up my job, or I want to change up my friendships, or I want to, because we have that, it's called mortality salience. That's the boring science word for like when you're made aware of the fact that your time is going to come to an end. So it did create this sort of, I want to design it differently, and a motivation. And that's why a lot of people did move around the country, or they did change jobs, the Great Resignation. They have done a bunch of changes in life in order to upgrade, right? However, there's the other sort of scenario, which is where we got out of practice of living. Because we had to live small, we became way less social. We became way more insular. We became, I mean, I'm a homebody already, but I became more of a homebody. And and so then now all of a sudden restrictions lift and we're able to get out again. And yet we're out of practice. We actually had built a whole routine out of eating dinner early and curling up on the couch and reading or doing what we do at home. And so on one hand, we have this desire to live and enjoy the life that we can live once we're out of a pandemic scenario. And yet we're also feeling a little bit like, oh, but does that mean I have to actually like go and travel? Because that's going to be annoying. And so we're in this middle space right now of admittedly wanting more, feeling lazy about not wanting to do it, or feeling uncomfortable or socially anxious about it, and we're judging ourselves because we're not living the life that we want to be living. And I think that there's an interesting period of reconciliation there where we have to say, hey, it's cool. It's going to take some more time. Don't give up on the getting out and going though. Like don't not book the travel to Europe. Don't not do the thing that you long to do. Sometimes we just have to actually book it and let the date come, and then go and get out of our comfort zone and start realizing, oh, right, like this is what it feels like to live again, even though it was just easier for me to stay at home. I don't know if that's been your experience.
I like what you said, because like when COVID happened, like most of us became a homebody. Like I became a homebody. Like during COVID, like it made me want to be at home more than leave the house. Like I was like, oh, I'd rather do work and watch TV or read or do whatever, or hang out with friends at my house, or just kind of do stuff at my home. And then like it's just like before COVID, I used to be out every single day, traveling at sporting events with my family. I was doing something. But then like COVID like messed me up so bad. Like it's like, oh, sometimes like I do want to leave the house and do something. like when I'm ready to do something, but then next day, like when people ask me if I want to do something, I'm like, oh, I just want to stay home and read and watch TV. Like that's like it really changed me so bad that like when I want to do things, I can't do it.
Yeah. Yes. Well, okay. First of all, we're very similar. I love the idea of being on the couch with a warm blanket and TV and books, and that's very comfortable. And I don't want to, disparage that, because like, honestly, like that gives me joy. Like tonight, looking forward to finishing, and the husband and I are going to have dinner on the couch. Like I look forward to that, although we know there's more. And so it's just about recognizing, still do that. There's no shame in having that kind of a, homebody existence. I think it's lovely. I love the nesting thing. And so it's not an or, it's an and we just need to pepper our weeks, our months, our year with enough stuff that does kind of stretch us. I don't know about you, but I don't want to go to that dinner, or I don't want to go to that thing. And then I go, and it was totally worth going. And I come home and I want to like high five myself, because I'm like, you did it. You went out and you had a good time. And then I just want to burrow home again. So really, most of us don't regret going out and doing the thing that we kind of have to get momentum to do. That's the life though. And I think unfortunately it does take a little bit of nudging. And we want life to be easy, and easy just means not having to nudge ourselves. But usually the nudge is in service of something better. It's in service of living a life that when we get to the end feels like we filled it with all the width and all the depth.
Yeah, exactly. And like I wanted to like ask you, like this is the last question I have for you. It like what is like some advice for people who want to live life, like who want to live life and live their best life every single day and really kind of get the motivation to do something?
Mm. Well, I'm going to cherry pick a couple ideas off the top because I have like 800 different thoughts, but let's just go with a couple. One that I think is seemingly easy, but harder when we actually come down to it, is spicing things up with novelty. And one of the things that emerged in my research that I was so fascinated by is that novelty is just absolutely critical to the experience of feeling life satisfaction. And yet most of us like routines. Most of us like to kind of, here's my thing I do every morning. Here's what I do on Saturday morning. Here's what I do on Friday night. And we have, except what happens is we get locked into almost like we're on a track where we're doing the same things on repeat. And we need to shake it up. We need to say, hey, if I normally do this thing for my workout every week, next week, I'm going to do something radically different. Like I'm going to try restorative yoga, which as far as I know is basically just like lying on the mat for an hour, which actually sounds lovely. Or if you normally do the same kind of brunch with your friends, shake it up entirely and say, today we're going to go to the library, which actually I think that would sound good too. But you get the idea, like take the things that you do and turn it on its head. If you drive the same route to work or school, if you order the same kind of food, shake it up. Watch a totally different kind of movie. Order a book you would never normally read and just do it for the sake of exposing yourself to something different, because that's what opens up different parts of your brain. And that experience again of, wow, I've had different experiences other than my usual ho-hum autopilot routine. So that's a biggie.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think maybe just one more for the sake of time. I'm a big fan of anticipating your regrets.
Oh, yeah.
Because, we have this really cool ability to tap into some regrets that might be in the making. And then we can edit the way we live now in order to live better. So as an example, like you just do this exercise, it's old, it's time-tested and true, where you go, okay, imagine I was on my deathbed tonight. And what are the things that I would sit back and go, oh man, and then fill in those blanks. I wish I had done that. Life's been good, but I feel funny. Like I have the pang of regret that I didn't do that. And most of us experience regrets for the things that we wanted to do, but didn't, rather than just regretting things we did that we just wish we hadn't been such an idiot. So what things are you longing to do that you're putting off because you believe I'll have time to do it later? You know what? I want to reach through this freaking podcast and shake everybody because you may not have time. Life is happening now. Book the trip to Prague now, right? Start, register for the tap dancing class now, if that's what floats your boat. Go back to school now if you've been thinking about it and you think you might regret it later. So get out a list and write out things that you think you might regret and pick one thing that you could actually take action on today to prevent that from actually becoming a regret.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's like one of the best advices because like sometimes people are like, why should I book this trip? Like why do I do things? But then when you're older, you're like, oh my gosh, like I wish I'd done this thing. And millions of people told me that, like, oh my gosh, Kylie, like you need to do something that you want to do. If you want to do this, do it. Like actually do what you want to do, like what's kind of stopping you. Because like growing up, a lot of my anxiety controlled me and like led me to stop doing things. And of course, as I'm older, I'm 16, and like I'm like, oh my God, I wish I did that when I was young. Like there's so many things.
Yes. I just love that you see that your perspective is already so advanced on this because you see, and like, I don't want to downplay, like we do experience realistic issues in our lives that do cause us in many instances to live smaller than what we might want. And yet where there's an opportunity, and even when it doesn't seem easy, that's the thing I keep coming back to. And I wish I had a better way to put it. And I sometimes wish life was easier and better, that we could just, live an amazing, astonishing life that happens to us. And yet, nope, we have to fathom what it might look like and take the initiative to make a plan, to put it in the calendar, to book it, to do it, to register, to call the friend, to do the thing, or to just get up and say, I'm going for a walk tonight, even though I feel like not doing that. You know what? You get to watch Netflix after the walk. Like book it, make it happen. And it won't necessarily feel easy, but when you're doing it, man, life just got so much better.
Yeah, exactly. I know we're running out of time, but I just want to thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for everyone tuning in, and thanks so much for coming on, Jodi. I would love chatting with you again.
Oh, I do too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, talk to you soon. Thank you for taking the time.
Mm-hmm.